Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Good Enough Chats. My name is Dan Bauscher and I am joined today by Steve, who is going to introduce himself very shortly. Before he does, though, I just wanted to explain a little bit about what Good Enough Chats is all about, if this is the first time you've watched an episode. Um, Essentially, this is about trying to destigmatize conversations around men's mental health. And what each of these conversations does is it allows us to get a bit of an insight into somebody's lived experiences of dealing with mental health. And the range of mental health experiences that we've already covered has been pretty wide. So we're hoping that by having more of these conversations, by showing people like you, the viewer, that there are normal guys who are just going through stuff or have been through stuff and are able to talk about it and share the benefit of that experience. It helps to encourage other people who might be going through a bit of a tough time themselves to open up and start to take positive steps to affect their own situation as well. So all of the questions, Steve knows what's coming in advance. They're the same 5 questions for every conversation that we have. And if at any point, Steve and I have talked about this already, if at any point something he says spurs an additional question from me that takes us down a path that he's not comfortable with, all he's got to do is say, I don't want to go there, and we'll get back on track. So without further ado, Steve, please could you introduce yourself?
Will do, Dan. I was just smiling there because of normal guys, but then I think we're probably yeah, it's a broad spectrum. I'm glad. I hope I'm in. Well, I'm not sure I am in there. But anyway, yeah, my name is. Good to be talking to you, Dan. You and I have known each other a while. My name is Steve Morris. I am 57 years of age. So I was born in 1967. God. So anyway, I've been a designer for, I would imagine, let's say, no, I wouldn't imagine, I'm going to say, I was at art college until 19, yeah, so just over 30 years, let's say. So, and really in the last decade, more into, so that covers everything from graphic design, which I did at art college, all the way through to digital design, all sorts of aspects of visual design. Now I suppose I'm more in design thinking and innovation coaching and workshop facilitation, that sort of thing. So more design in a strategic sense. That's my work thing. Let me talk a little bit, Dan, if I may, about family. So I'm married. I have an 18-year-old daughter who's about to go and do film production. Very exciting in September. I quite literally live in a field in the south of England, as you know. So we have a converted barn that we converted some 7 or 8 years ago, and yeah, that's kind of a bit of an intro. I hope that's probably enough because we'll get
Perfect.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you. Okay, so you mentioned you and I have known each other for a while. For context to any viewers, Steve may have 12 years on me, but I'm pretty sure that he could still run rings around me on a five-a-side pitch, which is where our paths first crossed
Well, I'm not sure I
20
can
years ago.
doubt that, but yeah, I'm not talking about
Um,
your dynamite left foot that still gets talked about on five aside, but that is indeed how we met, didn't we?
yeah,
Playing football together. But that probably is about 15 years ago. I was trying to think about this earlier, but
north of that. It's definitely
yeah.
north of
Really?
that.
Oh,
Yeah,
goodness. Okay, fair enough.
yeah, but let's aging
Yeah,
both of ourselves
moving
there.
on.
Awesome. So thank you, Steve. Question number one in these conversations is always why are you here today, um, sharing your lived experience of mental health? What has got you to this point?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. So I have had a lived experience, and I suppose my experience over the years had a sort of culmination point, let's call it, or an inflection point, or a critical point, really, about 10, just over 10 years ago. And I would say before that, I had experienced, what I now would look back and say, bouts of let's call it, depression, mental health issues. Yeah, I mean, if we go back much further, you could sort of think, I look back and think, yeah, was I always quite melancholic or a little bit, I had those moments of feeling blue, but actually I had no real knowledge that it was going to get to a point it did about 10 years ago. So I suppose my friends would call me something like, a deep thinker, back in the day. Oh yeah, and I would always be quite comfortable talking about those kind of things with my friends. I was quite fortunate to have a group, and I'm talking about my male friends particularly, a group of guys who kind of knew that I was prepared to talk about those things. And this is before what happened to me about 10 years ago. But yes, I'm here because of that, because I think, and I've always, and we'll get into that particular moment, I think, but I've always been comfortable also since having a kind of acute episode with mental health. I've always been comfortable after that talking about that, and actually felt, and I think partly, Dan, that's to do with almost like we want to create a narrative around these things that happen to us, right? Because that's sort of human nature, isn't it? Did we know this was going to happen? Now looking back, did I learn something from it? What did I learn? Can I attribute some kind of story arc to this? And then it becomes easier, right, then to talk about that afterwards. This happened and this happened and this happened, in a kind of story way. And then, yeah, looking for that causal thing. Oh, there must have been a sign here that this was going to happen. So I'm kind of bigging up the event, right, here a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I know you and I have spoken about this before, but I like to think that if I can share something around what happened to me, what's happened since, and how I've been able to kind of deal with some of these things, and maybe that will resonate with people, and people will say, this is not about giving people advice. We talk about that. It's not about necessarily learning something, but my story may resonate. It may be informative. It may, parts of it may inspire people. Who knows? But so that's where I am, and I'm quite keen that people see, as you said, normal guys. Stuff happens, and you can't predict it, and there's not always going to be an easy fix. But I guess I'm able to say something happened to me, which at the time felt, I would use the word catastrophic in some ways. And, I live to tell the tale, right? And so, yeah, that's kind of why I'm here, and how we've got to this point where I'm sort of discussing it. Should I go into that a little bit more, Dan? Or did you?
Well,
prompting you now. You're the.
Yeah. Okay. So I think for the benefit of anybody watching this now, Steve's experience, I think, is the only, when we've been talking about this, the only time that I have spoken to somebody that has had this happen to them or has found themselves in this situation. So it is a really helpful story for other people to hear, for people to kind of know how far things can go, what stage things can get to, but also, more importantly, what can happen that is positive on the back of that stuff. So we'll come back to the detail of that, probably third question, I think, if we do that. But you've kind of set out there a pretty kind of big picture about your broad experience of mental health. If we pull this right back to, say, the last week, how's the last week been?
Yeah, I mean, up and down with more ups, and it's really interesting because now I guess now I expect it to be like that, and I was thinking about how to what's a good analogy. I'm always thinking, Dan, about sort of either sort of visual metaphors or analogies or whatever. Always trying to make sense of stuff. Okay, and sometimes you have to stand back and go, it just is what it is, if I use that current vernacular phrase. It's sometimes, you know, people talk about like, well, you're trying to smooth things out. I don't see it like that. For me, I'm going to have moments where I'm feeling a bit, you know, what's all this about? Oh, this is painful, or this is difficult. And then knowing that there are going to be moments very soon after, probably in my experience, where it's like, oh, this is great, it's fine, it's all good. And mostly in the last week, there's been more of those than the others. What I try not to do, I suppose, myself, is think I need to eradicate those other moments, right? Or I need to smooth it out so it's kind of, no, I'm fine with a little. I suppose it's like, if it's it's being comfortable on the roller coaster, potentially, that's one analogy. Or, you know, riding the waves and getting better at that, and accepting that you'll have the, you know, the big breakers or whatever. I mean, I'm not a surfer, right, at all. I don't think I've ever done that. So, but yeah, so some moments in the last week where you're feeling a bit down about this or that, and many really good moments where you're actually content, comfortable, happy, all of those things. So, and I guess I kind of expect that to happen. I mean, there will be, you know, not every week is the same, of course, but in a way, I suppose I expect a week. You know, we're talking about that time frame to be a bit like that, and I'm kind of comfortable with that.
Yeah, I think that's the way I kind of talk about it when I'm explaining this to people that haven't been through something like this is when I was in a really bad place, there were the absolute crashes right down at the bottom. I've never had the sort of the manic highs to offset that. But what I would describe as recovery, and let's be honest, recovery is an ongoing thing. It doesn't get you to a finite spot. Is instead of going from like that journey, it's operating in this bandwidth here, where kind of that is normal, this is happy, this is unhappy, and actually the waves operate in a lower frequency. And they do that because, you know, as you've just said, when you get to one of those points where you're not feeling great, you know that there is a better time around the corner. So kind of accepting that there are these fluctuations is, in some respects, an important part of enabling yourself to get through the trickier parts, because you can see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, and I kind of like that frequency thing, you know. I mean, obviously we like that, you know, it's the same kind of thing, right? It's the kind of these waves or ups and downs. But I think, you know, to your point about, it's like moments, you know. Something I found really useful after the thing we'll talk about, you know, big trailer, big teaser, right? This, but is knowing that nothing kind of stays the same, you know, knowing that there's change. I think that's quite comforting for me, because that also, that if you feel like this, it doesn't last, right? Whether that's physical, mental pain, whatever it is, this is a moment. It might have this length of time, but it's still a moment, right? Or it might be shorter. And you know that U2 song, Stuck in a Moment with You. Do you know it? It's about Michael Hutchence.
I don't know that one.
Okay.
That was probably after I switched off YouTube.
Yeah,
YouTube, to be fair.
we're all going to talk about music, but yeah, I mean, it was after I sort of, you know, went away from you. I went back, and then I went, you know, away, and then this album was quite good. Anyway, let's not get stuck in the music. But it's a really good song with which is about Michael Hutchence in that situation, because I think Bono was a friend of, they were quite close, and it's called Stuck in a Moment. I think it's called Stuck in a Moment. Anyway, there's definitely Stuck in a Moment in the title. And it kind of describes that thing of being, and by the way, I'm not talking about that. I'm not getting into the whole the thing with what happened to Michael Hutchence, or I'm not making any comparison. But I think just that idea of, you kind of feel like you can be stuck in something, but actually it is just a moment, and then you just move on. And I think just to your point, or it moves on. You don't necessarily move on. You move. You are moving along with it. I think your point about it's like, for me, I have to be, because I think I had a fairly acute episode and haven't had anything like that since. For me, it's just, I'm not so concerned about going there again, although, and we'll talk about that, although, you have to be aware, because there's no reason why, if something's happened before, necessarily it wouldn't happen again. But then that's all about how you build resilience, or you start to notice signs and things like that. So for me, it's more about accepting, taking notice of how I feel. And then if the signs are that, hang on, this is not just a bit of that, actually it's potentially, that potentially, then just saying, okay, what personal interventions or things do I need to do? And that could be a number of things, right? It could be just talking to people about it. First and foremost, it's definitely talking to people. And secondly, it's then sort of, over time, I've known what works for me, if you know what I mean. And obviously, I've also known that, that there is always, and there is always something, whether that becomes some serious intervention, which has only happened to me, once, but whatever it is, minor interventions or small things you can do.
Yeah.
With that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we've talked around it quite a bit. So the next question is typically framed as, how has your relationship with your mental health evolved? And I think we've already established that this acute episode is set in the context of you kind of thinking maybe you were prone to deep thinking, possibly melancholic behaviors subsequent to this acute event. So taking that context into consideration, could you talk me through what led up to this, and how things have evolved since?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I take you back to 2012, not sure we were even playing football. You'd probably retired from football then. So if I take you back to 2012, I had been working in the same company for 20 years, and I don't even know how that happened. But you can imagine, your life just takes over, and then you meet someone, you're working, you meet someone, you have a family, a mortgage, and you're suddenly in this. And you say, shit, 20 years ago, I was here. Anyway, for a couple of years before I left that job, so let's say 2009, 2010, I started to think, I don't necessarily want to do this anymore. And it's not the people or the organization or whatever. It's not right for me, right? I want to move on. I don't want to, kind of lifetime of working regret. I've got something here, and I want to, I feel a little bit unfulfilled. So, whilst I was working, I set up a company with someone, and we were going to get into visual design, web design, app design, all of these things, which we did do, and that meant that I would obviously leave the place I'd worked at for 20 years, which I did in September 2012. And you know what it's like yourself when you start something new. I mean, you never really know what it's like if you've never done it before. And it does require a certain amount of hindsight, right? It's good here, but it requires probably more resilience and fortitude, whatever, and just more hard work, I guess, or more smarts as well than you think it's going to, right? And if you don't necessarily have a plan, or you haven't done it before, even really thought about that, it can be quite daunting. And I think, we had a little bit of work and we were doing stuff, but I think, it started to get tough. And I think maybe as well, was like looking back and thinking, turn of the year, lead up to Christmas, it's not so bad. Then, in the new year, and I remember that, so this would be now, I'm fast forwarding to 2013, January, let's say. Yeah, pretty much sure. Middle of January, it's cold, wet, snowing, whatever, and dark. And, for me, and this was not I had no real, there was nothing that really built up to this. I was kind of thinking, yeah, this is tough, but we're going to get through. We've got a couple of bits of work, it'll be fine. Um, um, I remember starting just to feel slightly unwell. And what I mean is like manifesting itself in the physical sense. Stomach, you know, we know that like nerves and anxiety, a lot of that comes through the, is it the sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system,
Okay.
whatever. But I started to feel like something's not right physically. So we're talking about, it's the same middle of January. And the first thing I did was really start to get anxious about that. And then, so I went to the usual things. Okay, this doesn't feel quite just normal stomach ache or whatever. I'm going to go to the GP. So I think I had a couple of times the GP. I even had a couple of, then I had some tests, you know, some more tests about it because I was convinced this is a physical. I didn't really at that point, Dan, I didn't really think, well, this could be something to do with my mental health. Because I sort of felt okay, you know, in terms of didn't feel particularly anxious, or you know, I was concerned, you know, and I can't remember. There was something that started to happen where that concern and that mild anxiety turned into something quite profound and quite, you know, I'm going to eat. I'm eating less because if I can't eat, you know, my stomach. There's something in my stomach. I've got to. And I remember that I also had endoscopy or whatever down the throat. You know, there was a lot of like, we're going to find something, and there's nothing, you know, right? Because thankfully there's nothing, you know, in terms of the physical, obvious physical. But the more and more I got more and more anxious about that, to the point where, as I said, I really reduced. I mean, it affected the way I was eating. It had started then obviously to affect my mood, you know, my ability to sort of focus on, you know, building a business. Okay. So this would have been going on for a few weeks. And I started to just feel pretty, you know, pretty low, I would say. And I started to do the thing, you know, catastrophization, you know, well, this is going to work, or I'm going to be ill, and then I'm not going to be able to work, and then I'm not going to be able to provide for my family. You know, this kind of goes, it just goes bigger and bigger and bigger.
I know it well.
So this anxiety started to build. And I think there was a kind of dam around, let's say, end of February, maybe it was early March. I think it was about early March. So this has been going on for about 5 or 6 weeks, you know, just sort of building up, slowly building up. And I stopped sleeping. And I literally just couldn't sleep, you know. So this was a thing for me. You know, I'd go to bed and I would feel like, I mean, your brain probably shuts down a bit, but you think like you're not sleeping. So this was another thing that was like, well, this is like a major catastrophe. Well, what happens to people who can't sleep? You know, so obviously you're exhausted because you're not sleeping. So you're not really eating. And at this point, I think, you know, obviously my wife notices this. We've been sort of talking about it, and I'm trying to articulate what I feel. And she's like, well, you know, obviously you've had the tests physically and everything. You know, you're obviously now, it's pretty obvious at this point, Dan, that I'm having some kind of depressive episode. What do? I go to the GP, and they can see this, but, you know, they don't have the time, and they prescribe some meds and medication. You know, I'm talking like Z drugs, if you're familiar, those are sleeping pills, but also SSRI. But as you may know yourself, and people will know out there, that SSRIs, you know, it's not one size fits all. It takes a while for them to work. So I felt worse for a while after taking those, which turns out weren't necessarily right for me. But I'll talk about how I got to the point where I know that. Yeah, and it was just spiraling, you know. So I wasn't working. I had to say to my business partner, who wasn't in this country, he lived abroad. No, I don't think I can't really do anything. Yeah, I don't have the energy to do anything. I don't, you know. I mean, I think I'm approaching some kind of crisis. Then in the meantime, but you know, I'm trying to reach out. So friends were pretty good, but they would come and see me, and they would be like kind of shocked because I'm not really functioning, and I'm not really the person they've seen before. So it's not like just feeling, it's not feeling a little blue or a little sad or having a bad day. This is something different because they can see, they can see it physically, but they can see something isn't there from me, that was me, if you like. And I can see I remember seeing the people coming and going, wow, wow isn't the right word, but like, oh, a bit of a shock. So they knew something was definitely not right. I sought other intervention. Talking therapies, I think was also a recommendation. But you get a call at that time. You get a call a few weeks later from someone, and I'm thinking, I'm actually having a crisis here, which is beyond what you're really, and maybe had that have happened in early January, right? That might be useful. I remember at a point, and we're probably going to late March now. So people are now quite worried about me. They kind of think, oh, I had this appointment to go to some kind of NHS talking therapist, or some kind of CBT, maybe it was, and I can't really remember, Dan, but it was like at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the evening, and people were coming in from like their work. So people were working and then doing this because obviously a lot of people were having, mental health issues. And I went along and I really, I was super, my anxiety was kind of through the roof at this point. So this had been late March, early April. But I went because I knew my family, particularly friends and family and my extended family, well, you should go to this. You got to do it. But I'm thinking, I don't think I can even get there. I don't even know how. I don't know how I'm going to be able to walk through the room and be in a room full of people. I don't know. Which, by the way, I'm you know me. I'm really comfortable with that usually. But like the level of anxiety I got to, and bearing in mind, not sleeping, I'd lost 2 stone. I mean, trousers. Wow. What I mean, it was like, new holes on the belt down. Which now you think, oh, that would be fine. But anyway, and I remember going to this thing, and it's kind of a pivotal moment. And I went to this thing, and it would have been. And there was like a mental health practitioner there with some other, with some students they were hoping to sort of train, and a number of people who'd have different levels of anxiety or feeling depressed or whatever. And there's a whiteboard type thing, and and I was like, this is not useful for me. I'm past this. I'm way beyond this. But I'm here because I remember saying to the person afterwards, and I think I actually broke down in front of the guy. I don't think he knew what to do because I said, I'm not going to be coming back to this. This is not useful for me. I am, I am beyond this. I need help, And it was a bit of a cry for help, I think, as well, because the catastrophization thing I mentioned earlier, that, you're thinking, this is where does this end? And there are things I won't talk about, but there's very dark moments in there, and I just don't talk about those. But where does it all end? I'd started to think, I'm going to end up being, sectioned, or like you just kind of these thoughts just spiral. Now, what happens if I don't sleep again properly? Like all of this stuff's going on. You can't.
So, Steve, can I just what's interesting about the way you're describing this is you're kind of talking about the anxiety that you experienced and the kind of the cumulative effects of different things taking hold. Now, I know for some people, when they get anxiety and they become sort of hyper aware and hyper kind of in tune to all of the things that are going on and that might kind of what it might do, the catastrophization. They don't necessarily have the level of self-awareness that comes with that you're talking about. You seem to have gone through a heck of a lot of stress and anxiety, but you still, like, you're standing there saying, I'm not coming back. This is not what I need. I need more than this. I need more help than this. That can't be something that is all that regular, because the catastrophization can cloud your judgment hugely, can't it? But to be able to then say, and yet I still know that I need more help than this.
It's a really interesting point, Dan, actually thinking about it as you said that. I think I would describe it as, yeah, I mean, I suppose I am. So, you know, it's always like, if you think you're self-aware, maybe you're not as self-aware as you think, you know, but I suppose I am, and self-analytical and all those things. And I would liken it to, I feel like I'm cut adrift, right? And I know there's a way back. I just need someone to actually provide that way back, you know?
Yeah.
And you're right. I suspect that there are people out there who would say, well, that's not the way. Yeah, because who knew? We're all different, right? But that was my thing. It's like, what I kind of, even though I feel that you're catastrophizing, so, you know, you in a way, your brain's saying there's no way back. You kind of know there is, but really you're saying, somebody help me. You know, somebody help me, because at that point, I think I'd also felt like I've got to find the solution, you know, solutions, whatever you want to call it. I've got to find a way out of this on my own. But actually, what I need is other people to make this easier and help me. And you know, my wife, my family were brilliant. You know, my wife, but I don't. But she didn't know. She didn't know. She didn't know how to, because it had got to that point. It's like, well, this. She kind of knew it was serious, but it's like, well, how do we get from here? Which is like, you know, my husband can't really function. You know, he's not functioning. He's not himself. He can't function. He's not. He probably is not sleeping. How do we get out of this? You know. And I think it's really difficult for her. I mean, my daughter would have been, so she would have been 7 or 8. You know, my wife is working. You know, so it's difficult. And what happened was that my sister, who lived in Somerset, had her own experiences with, you know, mental health, and had an awful lot of therapy, and actually she came over one weekend. She was like quite, you know, she'd now obviously realised, oh, this is a lot worse than I thought. And then I think she was the one who said, I know how to create, to make I think I know what is required here from my experience and experience of others, right? You know, family members or whatever, extended family or in-laws or whatever. So it was, you know, I remember her seeing me at one point. So this, I think, was very early April 2013. And obviously she's there to give my wife support and everything as well. And I think she said, okay, here's what we're going to do, kind of thing. And in a way, that's what you want. You want to, at that point, you're kind of like, someone needs to just rescue me in a way. Do you know what I mean? So, and yeah, so I think, and that was, okay, there's a clinic not far away, you know, it's a private mental health clinic. You need to see a psychiatrist. Got your appointment for tomorrow. So this was a Saturday, and on the Sunday I had an appointment. Doesn't matter, but it was certainly, I remember it. Well, you start to remember certain things, you know, that are, I think I went to see someone on the Saturday, an elderly Egyptian doctor who was brilliant. And I spent no more than 15 or 20 minutes in his room, and he just got it. You know, he said, okay, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me a little bit about what's happened. And he just got it. And he said, you're a visual person. So I always remember this, Dan. I've actually got the vision. I've got the drawing somewhere. I kept it. He said, you're a visual person. Let me try and draw this crudely for you, what's going on. And he drew it on with like some lined paper and like his biro or whatever. He said, I don't want to get too Freudian, but there's this thing that's going on with your ego and it's under attack, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, oh, an explanation. And he'd also worked out that I was a sort of person, probably from what I was saying, because that's what, you know, like I needed some kind of visual explanation and some kind of also some kind of, because I remember him saying, you need to come in here tomorrow for a couple of weeks, and then you'll be about 85% better. So it's giving me these sort of statistics and goals, maybe that's where you tweak things that I like to know what's going to, and, I mean, it was obviously quite an emotional thing, because at first, you're thinking, oh, part of you is going, oh, I've got to come into this clinic, and, I'm there. I'm not, I'm not an outpatient, I'm an inpatient.
Yeah. So it's residential for a couple of weeks.
Yeah. So I was yeah. So, and then I remember saying to people, oh, it's like, what's the money? Because, this is, and I am well aware, Dan, that we didn't have loads of cash lying around, and I didn't have private healthcare. So we had to do, but that is like, I think my sister and my wife all just said, this is not an issue. This is a resolvable issue, right? Getting the money. The issue here is, Steve is in crisis, and, this is the point we're at. And a psychiatrist has obviously suggested. So yeah, so April 2013, I spent 2.5 weeks in a clinic where I met lots of really interesting people. I did things I never thought I guess I'd always thought eventually I might have therapy. Before all this happened, I'm probably going to need it. But I did group therapy, 1-to-1. I did art therapy, CBT, mindfulness. You're all eating together, you're meeting, you're exchanging stories. I will also say the right medication at the right time under the right circumstances, because that can be really, really important. And the first thing for me was actually reducing this super heightened level of anxiety, right? Which, you need to do with, we go into the, but benzodiazepines are the ones for that, right? Bring you to a level where actually some of the, let's say, treatments are going to work. Because if you're not functioning, you're fight and flight or whatever is like through the roof, then you kind of need to get to a point. So for me, I was fortunate, I think. But 2.5 weeks later, I did leave. I then returned over the next couple of months as an outpatient, just checking in, etc. But that worked for me in the sense that when I left, I was pretty much back to, let's say, normal, Dan, pre-January. Yeah. Yeah, I was. And I had people coming to visit me, and I will say as well that people coming, that whole thing has done quite a lot. I think I'd like to think to sort of destigmatize this stuff with my own peer group, right? People came to see me, kind of normalized. Yeah, we're going to see Steve. He's sort of in hospital. It's just not the same as, he hasn't broken his leg or he's not got a condition, but something else has happened to him. And so, that's an acute, I would say. So that was like an acute depressive episode, I would say. And
yeah,
unfortunate to and then you begin the process of going, how do I, what can I do? You don't want to rush back into I've got to try and build a world-beating business and all that. No, I took my time, started to kind of process everything that happened a little bit, and like maybe that self-awareness of going, okay, right, thank God I'm here, which was obviously a relief for everyone, not least me. I'm here at a position where I feel like I was. And then I suppose, Dan, what you do a little bit is you try to, I guess, look back and think, okay, what could I have seen that coming? What could I have done? And actually, sometimes people will ask, do you think that was a positive? A positive experience, I know what they mean. It's like, I think it was a positive outcome, and it's a really, I think, adds to your self-awareness. Certainly for me, adds to self-awareness and my ability to understand how mental health, what that means for me and how I need to just go, okay, there's moments you've just got to, what works for me in terms of resilience, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting as well, because like the was it a positive experience is is an academic question, isn't it? Because it is the experience that you've had, and you can't unwrite that either way. But I would say on balance, I think about my own experiences. Um, it was horrendous, in the really, really bad parts of it. But
Yeah.
you there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that you come out of it the other end with the benefit of that experience. If the experience doesn't hold you back, it teaches you something, possibly many things about yourself, about what you need, what you don't need to live a more satisfied, contented life. There are, whether it's lots of little things or it could be some major fundamental things, like, you need to shift your career, you need to end a relationship, you need to leave a particular part of the country to put these, whatever it is. If you, with the benefit of hindsight, you can look back on it and go, I learned X, Y, and Z about myself through that, and that has become invaluable to me. That's got to be a positive.
I think so, and I think, Dan, the thing that is it takeaway, whatever, like learning from
Well,
it.
actually, that's question number 4, Steve.
Ah,
So, which segue? Question number 4. What have been the light bulb moments along the way, Steve?
Well, there's a light bulb moment, Dan, of no, this can happen. It happens to anyone. At does everyone have my experience? No, but this stuff happens to everyone, and I think there are things you can do about it, but it does happen. Like, people get ill in all sorts of ways, right? People get mental illness in, their mental health. It's no different in that respect. There's not, oh, well, you should have had a really trippy, like, you should have had a sunnier disposition, or you should just at this point, you should have done this or that or whatever. No, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not saying the path it took was inevitable in the sense of how it all ended up, but this is something you don't choose, and it's hard to predict, and it can come out of nowhere sometimes. So it can, in my situation, sort of feels like it came out of nowhere, even though I think maybe, looking back, you think, well, I was, I'd had certain, nothing like that, but I had certain feelings before. But, it's very hard to predict that, like one cold January, you're going to start feeling a little bit unwell, and then 2.5 months later, you're in a clinic. I mean, that's not, that's hard to see how that would have could have been different. I think, yeah. So knowing it's comforting to know this happens in a way, and that actually to lots of people, and that actually there's always hope. There's always a way. I feel that you can, in your own way or with the support of others. And I think this thing, that we know, that we, this talking thing is I think it's really, really important. And my friends and family know that I've never really had a problem talking about it, because I think there's something I'd like to think that certainly it's helped me, and maybe it helps other people, whether that's, like, say, destigmatizing. I think if you think about, like, 2013, I mean, we're in a very different situation now, 2024, about this stuff. I mean, 11 years ago, I mean, the idea of mental health first aiders at companies, one of the companies I've recently worked at, they had a couple, and that, I don't think in 2013, that, I mean, and I don't think that's uncommon, by the way, is it now, having, certainly something but that would have been uncommon then. and that's only, you know, a decade ago. But you know, you've got to find the ways, I think, of being able to be comfortable talking about this stuff.
It's there's a selfish benefit to it as well, right? There is you talking about it is going to help other people, and you can never presuppose which way it might help somebody or who it might help at any
No.
given point in time, right? But the flip side of it, and this is something when I sort of took the decision to start talking more openly about my own experiences, I felt guilty about initially, and then sort of slapped myself around the face. Well, don't be. This is the ridiculous thing to feel guilty about. Is the process of talking about it yourself is cathartic. It helps you.
Mm.
It helps you to process things. It helps you to realize things that perhaps you hadn't realized before, or be reminded of things that you'd forgotten in a passing moment previously, that are actually useful for you to go through as well. So, you know, I did, like I say, I did feel guilty that I came out of some of these conversations where I'd unburdened myself to, you know, a mate down the pub, whatever, who made the mistake of saying, "How are you?" not expecting an honest answer back.
Yeah,
But
bad luck. That's what you're
yeah,
going to
yeah.
get.
So you've asked that question at the wrong time, or maybe the
Yeah,
right time. You just don't know it.
yeah.
Um, but there is that, I call it a quid pro quo. You know, you talking about it helps others, but you talking about it helps you as well, which is just as important.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely. And I think that I would like to think that people have felt even more comfortable with talking about stuff with me because I've been, like you said, because it's kind of reciprocal. Oh, I can, yeah, that's cool. I can talk about that. I will. So I don't. Was there any? So I was going to talk about a little bit about now. But I don't know if there was a question. I don't want to preempt another question, Dan. So
What? Yeah, yes, Steve. Stop preempting the questions. No. So the final question that I have
yeah.
is: if somebody came to you today with a similar challenge,
Mm.
what would you say to them? But before we go into that, let's talk about now. Let, let's
Yeah.
let's let's focus on that.
Okay. So I think what I wanted to say was really about the last 12 months, which have been challenging in a work sense. And I think I'd started to. So it related to that. I'd started to sort of think, hang on a minute, I'm nowhere near where I was back in 20. But now I know what I know, and I'm feeling not, you know, and I had a conversation with my wife, not, you know, I'm feeling a little bit, you know, down about stuff and a little bit. So she said, just check into the clinic. Why not? Which is what I did. And by the way, when I say checking in, I had a couple of appointments with a psychiatrist, right? And just spoke about, obviously, where I was currently. And just doing that was incredibly useful, really, really helpful. And, you know, actually where I am now is you know, compared to where I was, say, let's say June, July last year.
Mm.
So that was me sort of, that is kind of a you know, sort of self-intervention, whatever that word, right? Saying, okay, I know where I am. Just check in with your loved ones. Say, what do you think? Yeah, go do that. Okay, right. That's cool. That's what I'm going to go and do.
What you've raised there, I think, is a really important thing, um, because I see this in myself as well. Um, there is a risk, I think, that when you're going through these kinds of experiences, that you tend to think of, okay, well, this is the problem now. I'm going to go through this process and then I'm going to be fixed. And then forevermore it will be absolutely fine. But life's not like that, right? Add into that the fact that when you get to a point where you're feeling anxious, you're feeling depressed, you're feeling low, you are not going to be able to immediately recall all of the things that you've learned and that you've been told previously about how to deal with this. So in your example there, it was your wife saying, Steve, you've been through this process.
Yeah,
You know what helped you the last time. I'm here to remind you that that's still there.
you're
Just
absolutely
going,
right.
a bit of contact time back with those
Yeah,
people, with that might
yeah,
be what you need.
yeah,
And sometimes that's all you need. Somebody to say, why don't you go and speak to someone? It's not offering up a solution. It's just saying this might be part of the way that you help yourself because you've been through this.
yeah. And I think absolutely, and I think that knowledge that you acquire through experience, right, is the thing. You go, okay, and I think for me, there's a little bit of, oh, it'd be quite, I know these people can help me, even though I don't need the same level of, I know where and that's quite comforting, I think, as well.
Mm,
So you know that there is, you know, and for me, that was a big thing. I know how to access, before, when I was in that crisis, it's like, where is the kind of lifeboat, right? Where is it? Does one even exist that is accessible? Is it, or is it, over there? Like knowing there is that, and that might sound a little bit, I don't know, melodramatic lifeboat, but it can feel like that sometimes, right? I mean, it's a
I
pretty good
think it sounds like a perfect
yeah.
analogy to me.
So the
Um,
question four, five. No, but
question
it was,
five. Question
yeah,
five. So question five is so somebody comes to you and they're
mm,
going through something similar.
yeah.
Um, what is the most important thing that that person can do for themselves based on your experience, I should
Yeah,
say?
yeah, of course. Well, certainly find the people the people, your loved ones, your friends. I think have the conversation because you know maybe and it's just a conversation. People got to be quite good. Let's be honest, we're not therapists, right? And that's a very that's a skill, and that's a we know that that's a very valuable and highly skilled profession, right? But the idea of being able to talk to people about this and be able to say, I just need to talk. I just need to say how I'm feeling about this. It isn't, and that's perhaps a totally different thing. It still is not. It's not easy for a lot of people to do that. I know people who find that still quite, they can talk about all sorts of things, but when it comes to like a little bit of, this is how I'm feeling, and when that's quite difficult. But I would definitely say that's the thing, because I think it definitely, without a doubt, it's helpful. You get different perspectives as well. People aren't there to fix, right? They're not there to fix. You just want people to listen, and maybe there's a suggestion, or oh, maybe you could. And also knowing, so that's the sort of thing. That's what I would say. I mean, yes, always if you can, and you're at a point where you can, I mean, professional help is, is going to be part of that, right? At some point, I'm not his, like what I wouldn't say is, and I'm not being down on GPs or anything, but we know this the situation and the pressures and everything, and medication is not straightforward. Well, we've got these, we've got just go away, and that is which is why there are psychiatrists, right? They know, not only do they know the whole picture, right, but they are doctors who understand the different medication a lot more than general practitioners. They're general, okay. But that would be the thing. Talk to people, reach out, and then, as I said, there is obviously other things after that, but that would be the sort of advice. Um, yeah,
You. Thank you, Steve. That, as I said earlier on in the recording, the experience that you've been through, I haven't personally spoken to anybody else that has been through um, that process, that has kind of had the kind of almost the physical symptoms present themselves before the psychological
Mm,
systems, the
mm,
symptoms presented themselves. And I think your willingness to share this with other people um, could be really, really helpful for someone somewhere. As I said, we don't know if anyone is going to watch this and go, ah, I know I should do something constructive to
mm,
because that resonates. But I firmly believe that the more people like you are willing to come forward and say, this is what I've been through, this is the impact it had on me, this is what I learned from it. No, this is a continuation of the journey that I'm on, as opposed to I've got to that place, everything's fine and everything's dandy, but I'm on a journey, I'm in a better place now than I was then. And I have the tools and the skills and the experience to reset myself and put myself back on track when I need to, is hugely valuable. And I'm very, very grateful for you taking your time to do this. Um,
My pleasure. I mean, Dan, that it's that thing you said, that gaining a deeper understanding of yourself, which might sound a bit woo-woo, whatever, right? But it's true. And I would say I definitely have that. Call it self-awareness, whatever. But yeah, I think if this is helpful for anyone in any way, then that's a good thing, right? And the rest is in the memoir, okay? Coming soon. Well, it's not coming soon. Probably 20, whatever. If ever. I
I'll
mean, I don't want
update
to
the
like say,
video.
oh, it's definitely coming, but it might come. You never know.
I'll
Um,
update the video with a link to your book when it's available, Steve.
excellent. Okay. No, it was good. It was good to talk. Good to
Thank
chat.
you. Thank you. And thank you to everybody that has watched this episode, everybody that is getting involved in the comments when we're sharing the links to these, that is showing support to Steve, that is showing to support to other people. If you can like, share, subscribe to this content wherever you see it. Yes, well, there will be a thing at the end of this that says click here. But this is really, it's really important that we're in the sort of nascent stages of doing these conversations, and the more people see this, the further it can travel, the more stories we can unearth, and the greater the chances that we can keep these going, keep the momentum building. So thank you very much for your time, and we'll be back again for another episode of Good Enough Chats in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, take care of yourself, and
That's one, Dan.
we will catch up with you again soon.
Thanks.